Okay, so if we can start with ENEL-X, the company, give us a bit of background. I think you describe yourself as an energy transformation company, so perhaps a bit about what that means and what the company's sort of vision is.
Well, yeah, firstly, the energy systems business model is changing. For the last century, it's been a one-way street from producer through to consumer. Now energy is becoming more distributed and cleaner. There's new technologies and tools emerging, which are really just disrupting this one-way business model. So how we use energy today really opens up opportunities for people, for business and cities. And ENEL-X wants to support them so that they can go about their lives in a smarter, more sustainable way. In the business context, we see real hidden value in the energy line item. It's a large cost for data centers, and we think it can make them more competitive. So we help businesses uncover and unlock this value by providing proactive strategies and business models to lower the overall cost and increase resilience, decarbonise energy supply.
Okay, and with the data center industry in particular, so far, I mean, they're compared, say, to the travel industry, the airline industry, they kept fairly much under the radar. And I know they're aware they've got to do more. And perhaps I'm being a bit crude in characterising at the moment, they seem to be sort of hell-bent on planting trees to offset their carbon. I'm sure others are doing more. But I guess in sort of broad terms, what are some of those opportunities for data centre companies to become more sustainable, greener?
Yeah, I think there's some fantastic opportunities for data centres to really make a difference in this space. I think there's a big opportunity for data centres to present themselves as a good grid citizen. It's not always about energy efficiency. Grids for various reasons are under significant pressure to balance the grid and deal with the amount of renewables that are coming onto grids. Data center providers can really present themselves as an opportunity to that through participation in demand response, through some proactive strategies on the demand side. We recognise it's not always easy for data centers to come off grid that way. There's other opportunities as well for data center providers with these large energy consumption loads and volumes to really make a difference in the renewable energy market. So we've experienced some good examples of where data centers, we've worked with them to solicit corporate power purchase agreements, for example, and really promote the market there and drive some competition amongst renewable providers.
I guess the other, well, not the other, but one of the major issues is that digital transformation, whether it's the one that's being accelerated now by the situation we find ourselves in. I mean, data is the new oil, we're told. So in simple terms, people want to do far more with their data, far more compute, etc. So I guess how does the data center industry meet that sort of demand? So theoretically, more and more data centers and energy, but also try and address, as what we're discussing, the sort of energy efficiency, sustainability element at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, we recognise the kind of low-hanging fruit of energy efficiency is largely being taken now within data centers. Things like LED lighting. In our experience, new data centers are efficient in the context of the technologies and tools that have been available in the past. But this digitalisation that is driving up energy consumption is also unlocking opportunities within energy management itself. So good examples of where we've seen digitalisation and new software unlock value for data center customers would be in the corporate power purchase agreement space again. We've had success in deploying a auction technology, which has really promoted competition with renewables and renewable providers and driven the cost of power purchase agreements down for data center customers. We also see opportunities around that interaction with the grid, where new technologies and new market, new business models are really opening up opportunities for data center providers to unlock value by using the flexibility that they might have, for example, within UPS systems would be a good example.
And I guess in terms of this digital process, there seems to be a sort of assumption that more and more data, and we're all being told it's valuable, so we've got to keep it. But do you think, there needs to be some kind of radical assessment of this situation so that we don't necessarily keep all the data we generate, we actually sift through it. And I mean, in our domestic lives, do you think it's right that we just think we can stream more and more services in, or do you think at some point there needs to be a sort of fundamental reassessment of how much energy related to IT it is acceptable for organizations, individuals, or do we just accept that life is what it is and we got to deal with this situation?
I agree broadly, but I actually think that there's more radical thinking that we could apply to meeting this demand through innovative and efficient and sustainable ways of meeting the demand. So talked previously about this concept of the data center providers being a good grid citizen. We've seen examples of data centers that are shifting the processing load, both from a time perspective and geographically, to suit periods when the grid has an abundance or a shortage of renewables. And that's a good example of some more radical thinking to dealing with this problem before we kind of accept that it's not possible to meet the increasing demand sustainably. And along that journey, there's more simpler ways in which data centers can perhaps help integrate renewables into the grid through demand side actions and activities, but also innovation and maybe some radical thinking in soliciting and supporting larger renewable deployments. So in many markets now, Ireland, for example, we're seeing a really big move towards corporate power purchase agreements as a way to meet the increased demand of data centers in a sustainable, renewable way.
Okay, before we sort of wind up, are you able to give us one or two examples? I know the company has a big footprint in Ireland, but I mean, from there or elsewhere where you have been working alongside data center clients to address some of these issues in specific projects?
Sure. Yeah. We got some really interesting things going. We tend to work with companies across the full kind of supply side, from helping companies purchase energy through to some of the more advanced things in demand response. But a good example that springs to mind, we worked with Google recently on a very large renewable energy purchasing program. And we supported that program with our auction technology, which was really interesting in a number of different European markets. We were able to run some pretty large auctions for renewable energy purchasing in the form of corporate power purchase agreements. And that was exciting. It was good to see, the competitive element of the auctions was really interesting. The other, area that springs to mind is maybe in a bit more of an advanced solution on the demand side, where we've been trialing utilization of UPSs, existing on-site UPSs in frequency type demand response markets. Would be an example of where data centers are using the existing assets to derive value. So there's a very interesting commercial model around that, but also fundamentally help solve some of these problems with balancing the grid and integrating all these renewables into the grid at utility scale.
I just want maybe one follow-up on the sort of renewable side and demand side. I mean, traditionally, the data center industries are fairly traditional and maybe think, gets a bit scared by some of this, whether renewable energy is deemed to be, a reliable source, and whether demand response might, open you up to being, short of power when you need it in a data center. I mean, do you think it's a matter of education? Once people understand fully how it works, they're comfortable with it? Or how would you characterize that, I suppose?
I think it's a matter of education, but I mentioned two examples there, and probably two very different scenarios. So the integration of renewables into a supply strategy, can be done very easily and sleeved through a kind of more traditional power supply contract, which firms up the volume and ensures that the delivery of electricity to a data center's no different from a more conventional supply contract. So there is an education piece around that, but I think that's probably an easier one to land really. Whereas, you know, when we look on the demand response side, it is correct. There is a reluctance, understandably, from data center operators who have a commitment to, you know, uptime and to processing data for their customers. But again, you know, it's about implementing change in the right way with the right level of control. And we're seeing some, you know, some good examples of where it's possible to, you know, to take part in these schemes in a very resilient way. And fundamentally, it's about making the grid in the end more reliable, because if the grid operators aren't able to integrate renewables at scale, and there's a problem with the grid as a whole, so it really plays into this concept of data center, you know, operators, you know, playing their part as a good net citizen to help the overall sustainability of the grid.
Okay, we've covered a fair amount of ground. Any sort of final thoughts, observations before we close?
Just, you know, ENEL-X, we're, you know, really excited to be working in this space. I think data centers, you know, can be part of the problem of how we have a sustainable future, given the projections for increased consumption. But equally, I think that they have the opportunity to be part of the solution to really promote, you know, wide-scale deployment of renewables. You know, to play their part in, you know, helping the grid transition from this one-way power system that we talked about to a more distributed and cleaner, well-balanced system. And you know, we're excited to be playing our part to you know, provide solutions and business models that unlock some of these some of these opportunities.
Okay, well, it was lovely to talk to you today, Andrew, and thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.